店のものを勝手に取っちゃったら泥棒さんだよ。
Yeah, the last thing any Asian countries need at this point is any more nuisances.
Cooper for this one featured a father and son admiring a ship setting sail on the ocean blue, the father even recounting his time on such a big boat.
僕もお船に乗りたいな。
Well, if you're interested, I do know of this one luxury liner that you can live on for several months and there won't be any concerns about safety or comfort.
The episode proper opened in the witch's world, which, yeah, it's been kind of a hot minute since we've been here, hasn't it? Though they weren't there for an exam, but rather to see Hana, who they'd be able to have for the day, in spite of all the other kids not being able to do that because protagonist privilege and all that. But yeah, it was good timing as it was also Golden Week in Japan, which is basically an extra spring break, made up of a bunch of national holidays back to back. Also, piece of advice, if you ever want to take a trip to Japan, avoid the end of April, as they tend to hit all of the usual tourist spots during that week. It's why this year, my family and I actually took a trip at the beginning of the month. Case in point, the Ojamajo want to go on a trip, and we're probably going to use their usual routine of having Hana's quote-unquote parents suggest that they can go with them. The only problem was that they still need to figure out where they wanted to go.
私横浜行きたいな。横浜?
You want to see Milky Holmes, I take it. I really should get back to that series.
But yeah, having been there myself, it is a beautiful city that I highly recommend checking out. For Momoko in particular, she had a special connection to it, as it was where her mother was born and raised. And as it just so happened, she had also been inspired by a ship leaving port that had inspired her to pursue her dream of becoming a photographer across the Pacific.
アメリカではファッション関係の写真を撮ってたわ。アメリカで叶えたんやな。
Her dream was to take pictures of models with more plastic in them than all my model kits combined. Yeah, that sounds about right for the American dream.
Of course, they wanted to go to the spot where she got her inspiration, which they would go to, along with Majrika's choice of Chinatown. And both locations would happen to end up connecting to the main conflict of this episode.
It's just a coincidence.
They'd also use the new location to set up a food truck to make crepes, which are a bit of a step up from just plain old cookies, especially when you have a god baby in said truck, but they somehow managed to pull off a successful business with minimal terrifying incidents. Like seriously, this is actually kind of scary to look at. To make sure Hana didn't start looking like Zuko, Doremi and Momoko took her with them on a shopping trip to Chinatown. And it was here that we finally revisited one of the season's major themes about cultural exchange, as in order to haggle with one of the shop's owners, they need to talk directly with the Chinese owner, and neither girl could speak the language. Fortunately, English could work as an intermediary language, which I think is a real thing. I mean, Toei has shown it being the case in some of their other shows.
Japanese?
I don't understand you!
It's a good showing about how to find a cultural middle ground, which will also be a bit of a theme of the main plot of this episode, which we would get right into as Hana wandered off. She ended up at the pier, where she met the boy from the cold opener, who was older, but still clearly voiced by Romy Park.
And apparently he's also Captain Hitsugaya based on his mastery of the Shunpo.
Well, actually, he said his name was Ryu Komei, or at least that's the Japanese pronunciation of this kanji that's listed in the episode's credits. However, since he was clearly meant to be Chinese, I think it would normally be read differently, and I apologize if I mispronounce this, Liu Zhangming. Now, that's not to say that the Japanese reading is necessarily wrong, but for the sake of consistency, I think I'll stick with the Chinese reading of these characters. Also, yes, the Chinese boy is voiced by a Japanese-born woman of Korean descent.
I'm sure a mixture like that would make Johnny Somali's head explode. Formerly indicted, by the way.
Anyway, he took Hana back to her mother's and quickly befriended the Ojamajo and even helped out at the crepe stand. Yeah, as it turned out, he was trained to become a chef at his father's Chinese restaurant, which I think they make something similar to the French dish with their jiangbing.
I wouldn't really know. In fact, I've kind of got him more into cooking Korean dishes as of late, like buchimagai or daigijong. What can I say? Squid Game made them look so good.
But yeah, his dream was to become an expert chef on a ship and travel around the world, learning many different styles, including probably Western styles like French, of course. Now, obviously, there were some issues in regards to that, but the episode will address them in just a bit. That said, I'll say right now, I don't think I could ever handle the likely constant seasickness. They later decide to visit the little girl with red shoe statue, which, appropriately for this episode, was based on an old folk song from Yokohama about a girl in red shoes who was taken overseas to America by a missionary couple.
Though, it's worth mentioning that's probably not what actually happened to the girl the song is based on, Kimi Iwasaki, as she had tuberculosis and wouldn't have survived the long boat ride. It's more likely that she died in Japan at the age of 9, very tragically.
Still, good on this episode for being really thorough with depicting all of the city's major landmarks. Anyway, after a fairly wholesome bit of Doremi saving Hana from a fall, and the latter apologizing for injuring her as a result, Xiangming had to deal with his own parental issues. His father had arrived, and sure enough, he was against his son making some of that snobby French crap. Well, that, and he knew that he was going to use it as a part of his ship cook repertoire, which he was trying to bar him from pursuing, at least until he mastered cooking at their Chinese restaurant. Which, fair enough, as at least from my view, Chinese seems like a fairly intense cooking style that could make for a strong basis for a lot of others. However, like most kids, Xiangming was an impatient little brat who wanted to immediately expand to other styles and called his methods a waste of time. Thus, he kind of rightfully got a good bright slap from the old man. Having witnessed all of this, the Ojamajo of course wanted to do something, so they broke off the old reliable magical stage.
I thought we were against the whole brainwashing thing.
I mean, yeah, that's not what ends up happening, but the wording definitely sounds like that's what should happen. It's just a little weird when they've made such a big deal about forbidden magic, and that they could have just have said something more like make them understand each other, which is pretty much what actually did happen, as Xiangming was shown a vision of the past. In it, he saw a vision of a guy named Liu Koei, or more likely Liu Haoyan, who obviously was his father, as he even had his son's voice. Yeah, I guess the idea was to establish a connection between the father and son, though it is a little odd to hear Romi's voice come out of a young adult male. Anyway, he talked to a girl named Minori, who I thought for sure would turn out to be like his future wife, but no, she was just a friend who was a girl, and also dreamed of going across the ocean to become a photographer. No, and he also told her that he had already tried to work as a ship's cook and quit on day one when he realized how ill-prepared he was for the experience. As on top of how hard it would be to work on something that's constantly rocking, he also realized that they were big melting pots of culture. Therefore, if he even wanted to take some food orders, he needed to learn a bunch of languages, which just Japanese, Chinese, and even a little English couldn't cover entirely, like it did for Momoko at the shop. Moreover, his cooking skills didn't account for cultures whose religions like Judaism and Hinduism barred them from consuming pork and beef respectively. Sure, being a cook in Chinatown can be quite demanding, but it was nothing compared to a place where there would be even more clashing cultures beyond just Japan and China.
Just wanted to point out how this nuanced talk about cultures is coming from the show about little witch tradies who have a toad for a mentor.
Though of course, this made Xiangming realize that his father was indeed looking out for him, and at least didn't want to underestimate the culture shock that he would experience like he did. Though he did encourage Minori to follow her dream, as at least she would just have to learn one foreign language, and camera skills are generally more universal than cooking. Gee, I wonder whatever became of her, huh? Anyway, the sequence ended, and Xiangming went home and made up with his dad. And the episode ended with him sharing some crepes the two made with the departing Ojamajo.
This was a really good episode about understanding other cultures.
It effectively showed how, while having dreams of experiencing different cultures can be quite exciting, they should also be approached from a realistic and pragmatic standpoint.
I also appreciate that it wasn't too heavy-handed with its writing, which is a little unusual for this episode's writer, especially nowadays.
The writer of this episode was Yoshimi Narita, who, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of her work, but back in these days, she was far less about the over-the-top jokes and shipping. Hell, I'm legit surprised Doremi didn't thirst for Xiangming like she would most other decently attractive boys, but thankfully she didn't, as that would have gotten in the way of a great story about the importance of experiencing other cultures, whilst also being aware of certain barriers. In this case, this kids show brought up how career paths can be greatly affected if the clientele involve a lot of foreigners. The Liu family story was one where the father tried to teach his son about one such botched experience and what he learned from it. In turn, the Ojamajo, and in particular Boboko for some reason, were able to appreciate how much effort such adventurers had to put into learning about other cultures in respectful and meaningful ways. In fact, for the most part, this episode seemed to be very respectful towards Chinese culture, though of course I could be wrong along with my pronunciations. Regardless though, the Liu family's flashback sequence was really well done, with some very clever visual cues and colors to really get across the somber yet nostalgic tone of the whole scene. And overall, this is just a great episode about how fun and yet complicated learning about other cultures can be. Maybe one day, Xiaomi will be able to work on a ship, just maybe avoid Norwegian cruise. I haven't heard good things about it.
Thank you for watching. As always, maybe check out some of our other stuff on this channel.
Work on the next part of the Max Heart review is kind of back on track, so maybe we'll have something before the end of the year. No promises, but we'll see.
Look forward to it. Until next time though, for now my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I think I'm gonna try out a few more recipes. Let's see. Maybe I'll try some Gilgori toast next.